understanding our past better, by understanding our unity that comes down from the past, maybe we can learn something that would be helpful to us in not carrying on in this way, because we do live at an inflection point just now. This is one thing I'm pretty sure that quote-unquote my lost civilization didn't have, and that was nuclear weapons. But we have nukes today, and we have them in an enormous scale. And behind each of those nukes is a fragile human being with his own or her own ego and complexes and fears and paranoia. And we're reaching a point where those buttons are going to be pressed. We are, as far as I know, the first human civilization that has the capacity to actually wipe itself out completely. We don't need a comet impact. We don't need a solar outburst. We can do it to ourselves. And that requires humanity to make a major step forward in consciousness. And I think making that major step forward in consciousness will be helped by better understanding our own past.
I agree. I mean, it's just disturbing how many times we can travel to ancient places like Greece or any place where you go to Rome and realize, oh, there's a thriving civilization here at one point. And
you were in Greece recently.
Yeah, with Brian.
You went with Brian Morarescu.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Brilliant guy.
Brilliant guy.
Yeah.
But what a treat it is to have a tour of the Parthenon, the Acropolis with him.
Yeah.
And, we went to see the site of the Eleusinian Mysteries and all that. It was very, very, very interesting, but just also sobering, because you realize, like, this civilization did not make it. This insane, fascinating, complex civilization crumbled.
Yeah.
And the idea that ours can't is one that we kind of hold dear. Like, we're different. We got to figure it out. We're better. But there's so much evidence that that's just a normal pattern of human history.
Civilizations come and go.
Yeah.
We could be gone in 20 years.
Yeah.
I'd love to take you on a trip to Egypt.
I want to go. I'll tell you about an idea that was brought to me after the show. I can't talk about it now.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
I've made friends with Zahi Hawass.
I heard.
He's a very interesting
You guys are homies now.
Yeah, we're homies. we had a nice dinner together. And it's partly because who needs more enemies and hatred in this world?
Exactly.
And I said some very cruel and harsh things to Zahi in the past, and I felt the time had come to apologize for those. So I went to Egypt to apologize to him.
Really?
And we had a fantastic dinner together. His son joined us. Santha was there. It was very friendly and very positive. And
I love stories like that.
And, we've agreed that we will, if by chance we get a season 3 of Ancient Apocalypse, which we may or may not get. I'm not in control of commissioning decisions at Netflix, but if we get a season 3 of Ancient Apocalypse, I would like it to be entirely on Egypt. And what I would like is for Zahi to confront me on every point as we go through Egypt. Whatever one says about Zahi's explosive personality, he's been immersed in ancient Egyptian Egyptology for his whole life. And he has very strong points of view on it. And he's a fun guy in some ways.
I'd imagine that as people get older and wiser and realize the folly of their ways, particularly in their youth, maybe he would be more open to the idea that the civilization is just this civilization, same civilization, but older than you think it is.
Yeah, I'm hoping to persuade him of that. I think it'll be an interesting dialogue if we get to have it.
I think people for a long time had this concept in their mind that changing the dates somehow negates the accomplishment of the people that lived in the prescribed date.
Yeah.
That somehow or another...
the pushing it back.
Yeah. Yes, the pushing it back somehow or another. And they'll even say it's racist.
This is propaganda. This is archaeological propaganda. For that's been said to me repeatedly, that I'm suggesting that all the achievements of certain indigenous cultures around the world should actually be handed to a lost civilization, that ideas were brought to them. Yet, weirdly, those same archaeologists recognize that agriculture was introduced to Europe by emigrants from precisely the Gobekli Tepe area. That's where agriculture wasn't present in Europe until 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. It was brought in by other people. This is part of the human nature, that we share ideas.
Sure.
Somebody has a great idea, we look at that, we think, we'd like a bit of that too. Teach me how to do it. And this happens all the time. And it doesn't mean that the person who's being taught is any less than the person who's doing the teaching. The person who's being taught may have things to teach themselves. I've always felt that if there was a lost civilization at all, and I believe there was, but I can't absolutely prove it, I think we're looking at a terrible cataclysm. Part of it happened near Gobekli Tepe. Abu Huraira in Syria was hit by one of those airbursts, absolutely incinerated at that time. A terrible cataclysm with relatively few survivors, and that those survivors, just as we would do today, took refuge amongst people who'd made it through the disaster better. And those people who'd made it through would most likely have been hunter-gatherers, because hunter-gatherers are so resilient and so able to survive disasters, whereas people in a quote-unquote civilized condition are often not. I mean, we can see I understand that the hurricanes that are happening in the U.S. at the moment are horrific natural events which are killing people. But we're talking about something on a scale vastly larger than that. And it's difficult for me to see. We find it hard enough to make it through a hurricane. I find it difficult to see how we could make it through another Younger Dryas impact event, or how we could make it through a man-made cataclysm as a result of nuclear war, which is, I suspect and I fear, is much closer than we think. I hate the idea that nuclear missiles may be flying in my lifetime or the lifetime of my children, but I have to say, honestly, it's a possibility with the state of the world at the moment and the low state of consciousness of the people who lead us. The leaders and governments are behind this. It's not human beings, individual people who are behind this hatred in the world today. It's leaders and governments who are mobilizing that hatred to serve their own interests. And it's very dangerous. If we didn't have nukes, it would be less dangerous.
But yeah, I agree with you. When you're talking about Gobekli Tepe, one of the things that Jimmy Corsetti has talked about recently in his YouTube show is that they have stopped excavation and they've planted trees above some of the areas, which is very strange.
It is, yeah.
And they want the excavation to resume in 150 years?
Yes.
So what would be a logical reason to not excavate these fascinating ancient sites that are at least 11,000 years old?
Generally, with any archaeological site, they don't excavate more than 5% of it, and often less than 2% of it.
Is that because of funds?
It's often because of funds, but it's also because of the feeling that as technology improves, more may be learnt from these sites in the future. And that's a reasonable argument, because excavation is destruction. To a certain extent, excavation destroys what's being excavated. And therefore, when you interfere with a site and start excavating it, you may be destroying materials that in 100 years technology would be able to interpret in a completely different way. I mean, go back 100 years from where we are at present, and you didn't have carbon dating, you didn't have LiDAR, you didn't have all kinds of methods of dating objects, luminescence, the luminescence from rocks is another way of dating. We didn't have any of those technologies. We do have them now. And so I think the speculation is 100 years in the future, archaeologists may have technologies that would be able to extract more information than this. That's the case that's made. I get it. But I think Gobekli Tepe is such an important site. And I know for sure, because I spent 3 days with Klaus Schmidt, who was the original excavator of Gobekli Tepe, that underneath that place there are dozens of huge unexcavated stone circles with enormous megalithic pillars in them, all under the ground, waiting to be excavated. And the decision appears to have been made not to excavate them. And I do find that slightly suspicious. I do find it odd. I think the site has got such an important role. It's such an iconic site that to just stop the excavation or to only continue it in a very small way isn't satisfactory to
when
what's
you
happening.
say suspicious, like what would be the motivation for discontinuing that kind of excavation other than the fear of destroying things?
I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist.
Please do. Jump right in.
But there is an issue here. I've noticed that it isn't just attacks on me that certain archaeologists are making. It's also attacks on other specialists. For example, Dani Hilman Natawajaya, who is the geologist who brought to the world's attention the mystery of Gunung Padang in Indonesia, which appeared in the first episode of season 1 of Ancient Apocalypse. The possibility that this site is more than 20 7,000 years old, that we're looking at a pyramidal structure that has had several phases of work done on it, and that the earliest phases go back deep into the last ice age. He managed to publish a peer-reviewed paper on this, but unfortunately for Danny, he'd appeared on my show. And that led archaeologists to dive in on him, and there was a ganging up of archaeologists, and complaints were made to the peer-reviewed journal that published it, and finally they retracted his paper without any good reasons. I've got a major article by Danny on my website explaining what happened here. It's like we don't want too much attention brought to this. Let's crush it. Let's crush it right now. The same thing is happening with the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. An enormous amount of attacks are being made on that hypothesis, rather than considering it as an interesting explanation for the cataclysms at the end of the Ice Age. A lot of people are just focused on trying to destroy it in every way possible. And I can't help wondering, maybe there's some truth, deep truth, to this, that there was a cataclysm, that there was an ancient apocalypse, something really horrific that happened. Maybe it's a cyclical disaster.